Joining me now, Dr. Benjamin Freeman with the Georgia Tech School of Biological Sciences and bird expert for the day.
That's right.
And what a time to be talking about birds, because springtime, you have birds laying eggs, hatching, and other birds migrating, right?
Absolutely. So this is the apex time of year for birds. We got all our resident birds, like you said. A lot of them have their eggs and babies out now, and we got these millions of birds migrating through Georgia that they spent the winter in the Caribbean or Central America or South America, and they're flying through Georgia on their way to where they're going to breed later in May and June up in New England or Canada.
So, talking about migrating birds, when is the peak of migration season for Georgia?
It's right now. It's the last week in April is. And to give you a sense of what we're talking about, it's 10 million birds every night flying over the state of Georgia as we sleep. And so our skies at night are filled with this kind of river of migrating birds flowing north.
And how many miles will they travel in one day? Do they stop at night or do they keep going?
So most of these small birds, they're flying at night. So when they're flying, they're expending so much energy, they're heating up, so they like to fly when it's cool at night. And they're flying a couple thousand feet up. So they're up high, and they're flying all night, and then sometime in the morning they'll land, and they'll spend the day looking for food, and then the next night they'll often rise up again and keep flying north. So they're flying a couple hundred miles a night a lot of the time.
100 miles a night. But you said how many millions a night?
On the order of 10 million birds a night passing over the state of Georgia at this time of year.
And will they fly when the weather is rainy or stormy, or do they just like clear skies?
They like it when it's clear. So if it's rainy, they're going to come down and wait. And so it's actually when it's rainy weather, that's when you actually see a lot of the migrating birds down on the ground. Because when it's clear weather, a lot of them will just shoot over, and they're in a rush. They're headed to the places that they want to breed.
And where do they eventually go?
Anywhere north of here. A lot of them will be up in New England or the Midwest, Great Lakes area, but all the way up into northern Canada as well.
Wow. So then, for people who don't know, what are the threats that they face as they're migrating north?
Yeah, so migration is perilous for these birds. It's a ton of energy that they're expending. And so one obvious thing is they need a spot to refuel when they land in the morning. So they need spots with good habitat. And so like right here, we're on Georgia Tech campus, and this is actually a spot that for birds is great. There's lots of food here, but birds need to find their spot. So one of the threats that they face is loss of habitat, loss of places that will provide the food resources they need. Another one is cats. Feral cats or outdoor cats kill billions of birds a year. Another one is windows. Birds have no idea what windows are, and especially when it's dark out, they'll fly into the glass windows because they just think it's the sky, or they just think it's the forest, and die. So those are some of the threats that these migrating birds face.
So what can people do to help the migration happen?
To help the migration happen, we're talking about doing what you can to provide good habitat, whether that's in your yard, planting some native bushes and shrubs, things that will attract insects, things that will provide fruit and flower resources. If you have a cat, consider keeping it inside. I love cats. I do love cats, but they're rough on birds. And then if there's places that where lots of birds are getting killed on window strikes, there are things that we can do to the windows to make them bird safe. And so we're doing some of that work on campus for a couple hot spots where the birds hit the windows. We're trying to get bird safe glass on there.
Bird safe glass, what does that entail?
Well, if you're building during construction, you can actually use a different product, but once the building's already made, you can apply basically a film to the glass that looks nice to humans, but birds can see, so then they do not crash into it at full speed and die.
And then at home, if somebody has their house, what should they know for the next week to 2 weeks as all these millions of birds are going?
I mean, the big thing I think is just to know this is happening. Like it's a miracle. It's a marvelous thing that these birds that spent 6 months down in the Caribbean or Central America are flying over our houses and our neighborhoods. They're stopping in, these little visitors. And so the thing that I think is to keep in mind is just to acknowledge and appreciate that this is something that's happening in nature that we get to experience.
And should people turn their lights off at night?
Yeah, so turning the lights off is a good idea, especially for like taller office building type things. That helps. Yeah.
And how can people track it?
How can people track it? That's a great question. So we can track it. We can track individual birds that research teams have marked, and we can follow where they go either through GPS tags that the birds carry or through radio tags the birds carry, and they ping off receivers or cell phone towers. So we say, oh, this bird is passing by, okay. Or we can use radar to see, because like I said, these birds are flying up high in the sky, and just weather radar will reflect off the migrating birds. So that what that means is that the kind of analyses of the radar is what gives us the estimates of like how many birds are passing through Georgia? 10 million, because that's what we are inferring from the radar, combined with on-the-ground counts of where birds are.
What about hummingbirds? That's something people are so fascinated with.
Yeah.
Do they migrate the same way as other birds?
They do.
Yeah?
Well, so the main hummingbird we have here in Georgia is the ruby-throated hummingbird. So it's this gorgeous little thing. You know, it weighs about a quarter, maybe less than a quarter. And it migrates. It flies in one shot across the Gulf of Mexico to the Yucatan in Mexico or Central America, spends the winter there, and then it migrates back across the Gulf. And so they arrived here right at the end of March, early April, and now they've arrived and they're gracing our feeders and our flowers here in Georgia.
They're here to stay.
Yep. So they're both here to stay. So some of these hummingbirds will stay and breed in Georgia, and some of them are passing through again on their way to breed further north.
And let me ask you about. So we have all these migrating birds, and then we have birds that are here already. Mm-hmm. How many different bird species can we see in like the Atlanta metro area, maybe here on campus?
On campus, we see about 130 species of birds over the course of the whole year. So a lot of the birds are just passing through, some only in spring, some only in fall, some are here all summer long and breed. There's going to be a core set of 25 to 50 species of birds that will breed and be present all year round anywhere in the Atlanta metro area where you've got a park that has different types of habitats, that has forests and places for these birds to do their thing.
So as you were talking about with the migrating birds, making sure they have a habitat, I guess that's the same for the birds.
Exactly, yeah.
Naturally living here.
Yeah, and right here where we are now, this was a parking lot 8 years ago. And they redesigned it, planted trees, and now it's one of the nicest places on campus, both for students and faculty and anybody, but also for birds and insects and all sorts of wildlife. There's even foxes that I see hanging out in here pretty regularly.
Now, when I met you a year ago, you were talking about some research you had done in the past. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about that research and how you look at bird habitats changing over time?
Yeah, so one of the things I study is I'm really curious about why birds live where they do. So there's some birds that are going to live in the Atlanta metro area, but if you go an hour south, if you're in Macon or something, maybe that bird doesn't live there anymore. I'm really curious why. And I do a lot of that work on mountain slopes, where we see birds that they often like a little slice of the mountainside. They like the bottom or they like the top, but they don't like the whole thing. And I'm really curious of why that is. And then I study how that's changing with climate change. And so as it gets warmer in these mountains, places that used to be chilly up at the top of the mountain are getting warmer and warmer. And what that's doing is that's letting birds where it used to be too cold for them, and they used to not live at the top of the mountain. So now they're kind of inching upwards over the years and living higher and higher. It's like they're riding this escalator moving upslope over time. And some of my research has found that in South America, this escalator is actually really bad news for the birds that only live at the top of the mountain because they have nowhere higher to go. For them, it's an escalator to extinction.
Escalator to extinction.
Yeah, because like one study I did in Peru, these birds that were common when I was a toddler on top of the mountain, it's a super remote spot. People haven't done anything to the area, but it has gotten warmer in my lifetime. And so these birds that were common when I was a toddler are now gone from the top of the mountain. They live on other taller mountains in the area, so they're not globally extinct, but they've disappeared from these particular mountaintops.
Do you think that that could be the case in some of the North Georgia mountains too?
We're curious about that, and that was one thing I wanted to tell you, is that I have a team of students now that I just hired, who are going to go out and survey some ridgetops in North Georgia where we know we have data from 15 years ago about which birds lived where, and we want to go back and see if anything's changed. We do know that from the southern Appalachians in North Carolina, just across the Georgia state border, it seems like most of the mountaintop species there are still there, but the lower elevation species have increased. So it seems like in the southern Appalachians, at least at that place in North Carolina, we aren't seeing those extinctions, and instead we're seeing the kind of lower elevation species expanding their range higher.
So maybe the ones at the top, are they adapting, maybe?
We don't know. So they could be what we call acclimating, which just means that they get used to it. The same way that, in the middle of the summer, we'll be like, oh, 70 degrees seems pretty chilly, whereas in the winter, 70 degrees, wow, so warm. So we acclimate to those changes. Birds can do that too. So they can either acclimate or they can adapt. And the birds here, they're endotherms like humans are, so they produce their own heat and regulate their body temperatures. And so I don't think the birds are actually physiologically stressed that it's a little bit warmer now than it used to be. But it's a little bit warmer now than it used to be, and that matters for the insect populations that are the food for the birds and those sort of things. Or it matters for how the trees grow that the insects eat, that the birds eat. So it's about how the ecological system works and how temperature influences the various components of that.
So their whole ecosystem is changing a little bit, but they're learning how to kind of adapt to it.
Yeah. A lot of the birds are pretty flexible in the sense that they can handle different environments. Some species aren't. Some species are very specialist, but a lot of them can handle stuff, especially provided that we give them space to exist in.
And why do birds fascinate you? What is it about them?
Why don't they fascinate? Birds have always caught my interest from when I was young. I think it's something about the diversity of different types of birds, different colors, different ways that they behave, different types of food they use, different habitats. There's just so much diversity. I find it very exciting to get to know these birds, both the birds that are my neighbors here in Atlanta and the birds that live in some of the tropical mountains that I study as well.
You hear them.
I hear them.
I feel like they're talking a lot more than they were when we started.
Yeah, there's some chimney swifts that are kind of twittering and flying in the sky. There's the baby mockingbirds are still there doing their wee. That. A fish crow just called. We actually have two species of crows. They look the same, but one of them kind of sounds really nasal, and it's called a fish crow. It's like nyeh, nyeh. And then the American crow is the caw, caw. And so there's a fish crow just called. A mockingbird is singing as we're chatting. And this is kind of what spring is all about, is that there's just a lot going on in the bird world.
And you mentioned earlier an app where you can put in the birds you see.
Merlin.
Okay.
So Merlin, because it's like the wizard. Merlin's also the name of a species of falcon, and it's like wizard because it's magic how it works. It's not actually magic, of course, but it kind of seems that way because it's this free app that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has produced. So you download it, you get it on your phone, and you just hit record. And it listens, and it takes a recording, and it hears a bird, it hears that mockingbird, and it tells you northern mockingbird. And it hears the chimney swift, and it tells you chimney swift. And so it's a wonderful way to get to know the names of the birds that you might be hearing in your backyard or your neighborhood park.
Oh, I love that. And you have binoculars. Does everybody need binoculars to bird watch, or?
No. So there's plenty of people I know who watch birds and appreciate birds just by walking through and listening or looking with their eyes. If you get serious about it, binoculars are a must, because what they do is they let you see the birds well even when they're far away.
Yeah.
Because most of the time the birds aren't coming right close to you, and binoculars let you appreciate all the colors and patterns that they have.
Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you think people should know about bird migrations and the birds that are here year-round?
No, I think I covered what I wanted to share with you, but I would say like so here's a challenge for you, Melissa, and for your listeners is to see if you can learn 5 do you know 5 species of birds that live at your house or nearby? We were talking earlier.
Yeah.
You mentioned
I know I have a robin family.
You got robins.
She's got an orange belly.
Yeah, she's got that nice orange red belly.
I know I have a blue jay.
You got a blue jay.
I do have a cardinal.
And you got a cardinal.
Red, bright red. That's
bright red.
I don't know.
That's 3.
I have other ones that get stuck in my screen porch.
So
maybe little finches or something.
there might be so a finch.
Yeah. I can't name a fifth.
You can't name a 5th? What about do you have owls or hawks?
Oh yeah, we got a hawk family.
You got the owl you're hearing is a barred owl. So that's a 5th one. The hawks, there's a couple species of hawks that do really well in the Atlanta metro area. But yeah, my challenge is to have you know the names of 5 species of birds that hang out in your house or nearby.
That's a great project for the summer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin Freeman. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.